And welcome back to another episode of Matt Stats, the money ball of wrestling, along with Glenn Gormley and Kevin Hazard. I'm Jason Bryant. Today, Glenn's not necessarily going to drive with the data, but we're going to get into the Division One championships. But we've got a lot of data here, and a lot of this is going to come from my championship preview guide and a lot of the research that I do for it each year. And yes, pardon the sales pitch, but this is something that wrestling fans have been using. I think this is my 11th year doing it. And fans use it for their fantasy drafts, and ESPN uses it for the truck in the back. It's something that I developed when I was with Amateur Wrestling News, and I've just been going with it ever since, and it keeps growing and growing and growing. And Glenn, it seems like every time I ask somebody, hey, what else do you want in it? Somebody gives me an idea, and I can't say no to adding stuff to this thing. And what you have on screen right now, this is actually, we're not done yet because the brackets aren't even out. But I've got a little bit of a theme this year. I'm going retro with the NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System, for those of you who grew up in the 80s. And I'm not talking about these two guys, because these two guys were already they were up on Atari 2600s probably. But we've got the theme here, so I'm going to go through some cool stats from the book to play into the show. But we're also going to talk about the history of the Division One championships, maybe the naming of what is Division One, what isn't Division One, some of the misnomers and things like that. But Glenn, Kevin, this is the time where, like, when I walk into the arena, wherever it is, this will be my 23rd, I believe, I'll just start singing, "It's the most wonderful time of the year," with apologies to Andy Williams.
I firmly agree with you. I look forward to this every year. This is my favorite week of the year.
Yes, mine too. And that and Doug Dix's weekend, these are two favorite weekends of the year. But let me say this here. Anybody who doesn't buy this guide from Jason Bryant is a damn fool. This is the most data-driven thing I've ever seen. I follow football, basketball, all types of sports. There's nothing better than this thing. This is my Bible.
And just for the plug, wrestlingpreviewguide.com is a direct link to where you can get it. It is a digital file, and last year it was 230 pages. This year it is going to be even more than that because, just like we said, we started this show. It's got my brain thinking. I've gone through here. Some of the things I'll add we'll get to later in. I'm not going to give you away everything, but it's usually $25. Use the discount code MATTSTATS, and you'll save 20% on it. And it's one of those things, like, people that buy it each year, they're waiting for me. And I'm trying to figure a way to get this thing out faster and faster. I always guarantee it by the Tuesday before. So basically, when you're getting on the plane to go, you've got something to download on your iPad, read it on your tablet or laptop. Now, it's designed for tablets, even though, the layouts is not an 8.5 by 11. So if you're going to print this thing, one, I would recommend double-sided black and white and go to, like, the UPS store or FedEx office. That might cost you $20 just to print, which is also why I don't create anything hard copy of this except for the 5 copies I print for the head table and for ESPN, who have basically gotten to the point where, their broadcasting crew goes, "Where is this?" Like Shane Sparks raves about, this is the only thing he keeps from the Nationals each year. And yes, I'm very happy about this thing, and each year I always just kill myself to put it out. So on the screen, you have my working document. So I went with the NES theme this year. This is the pro wrestling from the NES back in the day. I fashioned that, use a little pixelator, and so behind the curtain, so to speak. So before we get any further, Glenn, one thing I was really big on is making sure we as a show educate the fan base as they listen. So a couple of the things we always talk about is eras, and there's a couple eras in wrestling. We have the eras where we only had 3 years of eligibility. There are the eras where we had the 1 year in 1947 coming back from World War II that freshmen were eligible, and we saw the very first 4-time All-Americans. That only year freshmen were eligible until the late 60s was 1947. Then we have the freshman eligibility era, or the Gable era, as a lot of people call it. Then I like to break it up even further. We have the Division One era, which began officially in 1974. Now, a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this myself, saying, how many Division One champs are there going back to 1928? Well, Division One didn't exist until 1974. So to be 100% accurate, there were no D1 champs until 74. Now, from 63 to 73, there was what was the university division. And this is where we get into the discussion about the Division II and Division III champions and high place winners qualifying for the D1s, the practice that ended in 1991. So we can check those boxes off. But within this, you'll even have the breakouts of how those guys did back in the day in play. So, Glenn, I want to turn it over to you since you're normally the host of this show. Where do you want to begin when it comes to this year's championships coming up in Tulsa at the BOK Center?
Jason, you just talked about the Division I era, and I've been getting a lot of questions on that. So why don't you start on that and try to explain to people why there's the qualifiers like the D2, D3s don't go anymore, why they did, the history of it, to let people know, because those are the questions I've been getting most frequently.
Yeah, the one thing I cannot answer, and I know there's the Division II coaches from that era, Pat Pecora is still he's still pretty grumpy about it because some people like to call this the Hasselrig rule because Carlton Hasselrig, as many of you know, was a 6-time NCAA champion. He won 3 Division III titles and 3 Division I titles back when you qualified through. And that practice began in 74 and again ended in 81 when we had the divisions. Now, there was a number of qualifying, and it used this sliding scale based on the returning points. Now, I found that looking through previous amateur wrestling newses and such. And then we morphed into a qualifier system that was based on, rolling All-American, or rolling actually not even All-Americans, wrestlers that got to the round of 12. And the round of 12, or blood round as we're calling it now, that didn't actually start until 1979. Prior to that, you had the round of 8, and then you had follow leader bracketing. As a matter of fact, I believe it was 1997 where we finally got full wrestlebacks. Whereas if you lost in the first round, you were guaranteed a second round bout. It was until through the 90s that some people were only getting one and dones at the NCAA Division I championship. So there's a lot of that. So let me jump ahead in my sheet. So pardon those of you watching. This is an Adobe InDesign file. Currently, it's 163 pages, and that is because I haven't added the last 90 pages. Because what happens is when the seeds come out and the brackets come out, that's when I got to then, basically line everybody up. I've got all the qualifier data, but I need to be able to organize it. And so when I do that, I'll give you a little peek behind the curtain. So some of the things I do, we're starting from the back. So when we get these numbers, these are the results since each weight class has the placements. And I say since the shift, since we changed weights officially in 1999, which is coming up, we're coming up 20-some, how many, 23 years we've had this thing, I think. Probably more than that, actually. I can't even count. Maybe it's 28. You're asking me to do math. So each weight class, let's get to the guide real quick. This is from last year's placeholder. Each page has 4 of them on there. It's got the headshot. You got the college, the hometowns, what they've done, where they got auto qualifier, how to pronounce it in some cases. I know Shane Sparks loves this part of it. But the preview guide's going to have all that. Each one's going to have the top seed. This is from Nick Suriano. It's a little pixelated right now because it prints a little cleaner. But each weight class is going to have its own section. The bio and the data. This year, I reached out to everyone's favorite Buccaneer. Actually, my favorite Buccaneer was Derek Brooks and Hardy Nickerson. But the Seton Hall Pirate, who many know from Wrestling by Pirate, Britt Malinsky, he's been keeping tabs on these stats for years. So I reached out to him for stats this year, and we've got it. So one thing I want to start with was go to the non-Division I era. Here we go. We were just talking about this. So 1974 to 1971, and I realize this is on your screen. It's going to be small for some of you. In this guide, we have every place winner in what division they came from, and we've highlighted the champs. So Shorty Hitchcock, Floyd Shorty Hitchcock was the first one, was a Division II champion at Bloomsburg, and boom, wins the Division I's. Ken Mallory at Montclair State and Tom Martucci of then Trenton State, now the College of New Jersey, famously the 2 Division III wrestlers that went up. And one thing that I believe is the story that's told to me about why they don't do this anymore. One, what other sport does this? None. You're not going to find one. There are situations where, well, what about this sport that has Division II and Division III teams up? Well, that's usually a national championship sport. It's not broken out by divisions. Difference is, I've learned this in hockey since working in, there's no Division II hockey. I mean, there's a conference, I think, a couple teams that play it out in the Northeast. But if St. Cloud State, Minnesota State, Bemidji State, those schools here in the land of 10,000 lakes, the land of 10,000 wrestlers, they compete up at Division I because there is no Division II hockey. There's Division I, Division III. Now, on the women's side, it's just National Collegiate Championships. That is Division I. There is a Division III, but there is no Division I in air quotes here. But within this book, we can go through and see that the last placer was in 1991. Dan Russell from Portland State was the last Division I place winner that came from the Division II, Division III qualifying era, and he was grandfathered in. So Hasselrig won his last one in '89. And what's interesting is the arguments about, well, nobody's ever done it. Well, of course, I will point to Gray Simons at the Lock Haven that won 7 national titles, 4 in the NAIA, 3 in the NCAA, which was then just the NCAA because there wasn't even a university division then. I mean, the guy's 80-some years old. He could still whip probably most of our butts anyway. But, we get in all this history. And this is where me coming into wrestling when I was 15 years old in 1996, I'm still learning this stuff. There are people that watch the show. There are people that go to the Nationals. I know, I'm the voice you hear. Me and Brian, Kevin's son, you'll hear us. At the same point, we know that there's a lot of people in that building that know more than us about what you're watching. So what we're going to do, we're going to try to bring some stuff that maybe you didn't know. In this guide, for example, this is what helps me do my job. And the byproduct is what I give for you guys. So this is something you can dig into. Also, this is something that John Peterson, not that John Peterson, but John Peterson, who broadcast at St. Cloud State and has done some stuff, he was asking about, hey, what about conference place winners? So I've added that to the book. Since the Division I era, you can see there on your screen, we see that the ACC's had 18 national championships, and this is not individual champions. This is total titles won, and you see that the Big Ten has 200. There's also a distinction between the Big 12 and Big 8. Wait, what? They're the same. No, they're not. The Big 12 history technically doesn't absorb the Big 8 in their own record books, but in wrestling, I'm going to put them together in a couple places just for argument's sake, even though I do have them separated. So that's a new thing that's added to the guide this year. Also, the All-Americans by conference by year. Now, this is something that Glenn and I got working on. This is, again, a byproduct of other research to figure out how many teams we had at one point. One thing I'm also proud of that we're adding to it as far as the current conference participation. So how is each conference done each year? Where are the qualifiers? So with our 7 current conferences, I'll go back to 74. Now, there were a lot more conferences back then. There were 14 at one point, I think, that qualified, maybe even more. I'll have to get the exact number, but since 1993, there were 14. And you see the ebb and flow. Now, this is also, there's some numbers that are less than 10. That is because there was no information on who missed the qualifying yet because they didn't show up in the brackets. I know one year there was a Southern Conference champion that didn't participate, so I'm only looking at, the Southern Conference has got 9 instead of 10 because the records I have right now do not explain who that 10th qualifier should have been or why they were scratched. Did they not make weight? They didn't show up in the bracket for one reason or another. To what I was talking about here, this is the fun stuff, Glenn. This is the geek stuff we were talking about, which also, if you can't really see it on the screen, but this will be later in the guide. The number of teams per year. Then we had the number of teams that each qualified, the number of teams in those conferences. You see, in 1993, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 15 conference qualifiers in 1993. Ooh, the blue is where the qualification system changed, and you see the numbers drastically change. For example, 2008, the ACC had 15 bids. In 2009, they had 33. So there's a lot of cool history when it comes to qualifying standards and stuff like that. I also have charts of, hey, how have our teams done the last 10 years? And we go back to that. So there's a lot of history in here about the qualifying methods entirely. And sadly, we've got to include teams like Boise State, which dropped wrestling, and then Boston University, which dropped. You know, the teams that come in, of course, we get to that school in Norfolk where I see great numbers, and then they get dropped. I'm working backwards here, but I've also added what schools' records are in the finals, what schools' records are in the semifinals. Those aren't as hard to figure out. But then we got what are the blood round situations. Now, I'm going to throw this stat out there for you for free. And thanks to our friends at the Blood Round podcast for throwing the information of giving us the use of their logo, because that looks cool. But there are 13 wrestlers to have reached the blood round, the round of 12, 3 times in their career and not place. 2 of them are active this year. Max Buren from Iowa and Mickey Philippi from Pitt have both finished R12 3 years. Now, they both, oddly, were first-team All-Americans in the COVID year. So it's another shot at hitting the podium, but I'm sure that, they're sitting there, and, this is one of the stats that I found to be the most interesting is how many people have made that round. And only one guy in history has ever made it 4 times and never lost. Zach Sanders from Minnesota was a 4-time blood round guy and won every single match to place. He's the only guy in history to do it. I threw a lot at you there. I love this stuff. So, I mean, it's like, what where else can we go, Glenn? Next topic.
Okay. The next topic we have here. Oh boy, there's so much to cover on this thing. The qualifiers, you started off on that. Can you tell us how the qualifiers used to be back when old guys like me and Kevin wrestled, and how they've changed now, meaning at large bids and all that? Could you explain that to the viewers?
Yeah, so in 2009 is when this was implicated. So let's go back in time, 2007 NWCA convention, Lake Tahoe. I'm pretty sure that's where it was. The NCAA comes to the wrestling coaches, and this is where sports have an opportunity to govern and put forth recommendations. And this is why the NWCA convention is very important, because legislation gets pushed through the leadership groups and stuff like that. Well, back in 2007, the NCAA goes, hey, we're getting rid of historical data. We're not going to use this sliding scale anymore because, for example, a wrestler in the MAC trying to qualify, there's a guy that graduated that is impacting his ability to qualify based on historical data. It's like, and it created this weird system where the smaller conferences, no matter how good they were, they'd leave good guys at home because they were looking for something. I used the CAA for an example. When I was in there covering it, I lived out east, and I went to Old Dominions, and they were part of the CAA, so I paid attention to this. And this is one that is a sticking point to me, and probably an explanation of why the system now we have is better. Because the old system, you would take wild cards to chase how many guys could get to the round of 12. And this one year, Charles Griffin was an All-American from Hofstra. Don Fish was an All-American from Ryder at 141 pounds. Ryan Williams was third at the weight from Old Dominion. Was a qualifier the year before, did not qualify because they wanted to take extra 74-pounders because that year Ben Askren was on a tear and everybody was running from the weight was pretty hollow. There were people moving up and moving down to get away from Askren, have a better chance to win an NCAA title or place higher. Well, the CAA coaches saw this and were like, well, we need to take 4 74-pounders instead of a guy that finished behind 2 wrestlers that ultimately, I think, finished 3rd and 6th or 5th. There were 2 All-Americans in the conference, and Willie I lost really close to him a couple times during the year. So it's like you leave a guy like that to chase, and one didn't go. I think he got suspended. I'm not sure what it was. And then the other 3 went a combined 0 and 6. So it's like you chasing this historical data to try to get so many people to this round to get one additional qualifier and affect the formula that way. So the NCAA said, we're getting rid of historical data. And they turned it on the coaches. And at the coaches convention, there were people wanting regionals. And I am against regionals for Division I because I feel like losing the conference structure gives athletic directors an opportunity to say, well, our conference doesn't sponsor it, and uses it as an excuse. We've seen several drops use that as one of their reasons. So I feel like we need a conference structure. Moving forward to that, I remember sitting there and we had coaches looking out the number of wrestlers that didn't qualify. We had guys like 24-9 not qualifying. We had NCAA finalists like Craig Henning from Wisconsin had a bad day at the Big Tens. Returning finalists did not qualify. And I think he had 2-3 losses all year. Crazy things like that. So they turned it on us. The alternative was like, hey, if you don't figure something out, the NCAA was suggesting it's going to be auto bids, champions in each conference, and then 200 at-large bids. And that'd be nuts because then you'd have, right now we have 47. Can you imagine? And then the NCAA would handle it. So rather than the wrestling community. So what happened was, and I actually got to give Tom Ryan credit here because I think the discussion was getting to the point is how we decide this, and said, and I believe Tom Ryan said, well, why don't we use this season's data? And that just changed the discussion completely. Whether it was his idea or not, but I remember hearing him being the first one to say it. So that got the ball moving to get to the first iteration of what we have now. 2008, we went through the system the last year it was going to be, but we also in the background had math and the RPI and coaches ranks and basically a dry run of what the data would look like to implement in 2009, which was the first year with it. Now, since then, I think representation has gone up. I think we've gotten the best 330 wrestlers to the tournament. Now, when you're locked into 3308, that means you're going to have some weights that are a little stronger. Some weights like this year, we had 7 at-large bids at 84. And then when we have 4 at most weights, 4 or 5. So I feel like what we have now, based on this multiple pronged approach, including coaches rank, RPI, and win percentage, is a better way to get better wrestlers. Now, there's going to be wrestlers that get left home. That's unfortunate. Yeah, it means something to make the NCAA tournament. It means some guys, this is their one shot. Or, sometimes you don't even have that with what happened in 2020. But the formula we have it now, that's how you get through it. And they set an allocation. So if you hit win percentage, coaches rank, RPI, you get 2 of the 3, you've qualified an allocation. You didn't qualify for you, but you qualify the conference and allocation. Then you wrestle X amount of spots for the conference tournament. Then that leaves 40 to 50 at-large bids once the conference tournaments are over. At-large bids came out on March the 7th. So the day before, then they make the brackets, and it's crazy. So that is a really quick version of what actually happened and how you qualify. So the numbers are posted, so you know what you got to get. And then there's other things that are interesting for the at-larges. So to be in the pool of at-large bids, one of the criteria is you've got to place 1 away from qualifying. So if there's a weight class that takes 4 and you place 5th, well, you're in that pool. And this is where you see like 9th place brackets or 13th place brackets some year. Like one year, the Big Ten qualified all 14 at 184. That was nuts. And believe it or not, probably deserved it that year. But, it looks a little wonky. I know that there's some discussions about, do the coaches really want to do these rankings? How do you figure this out? Hockey, for example, is all completely computerized with this pairwise ranking, which is a very similar component with RPI, common opponents, and win percentage, or RPI, common opponents, and head-to-heads. So all those things are factored in with the at-large pool. So every year there's a guy that probably has 5, 6 wins, or in some cases it's 1 win gets you in the tournament. Other cases, you need 4 or 5, where a guy behind you has 2 or 3 good ones. So, each weight class is different. So you can't exactly apply the same uniformity to each one because the context of each weight is different as well.
So how does that
let
work?
me say something here, Jason. Good.
So,
Good,
for example, Big Ten, whatchamacallit from Wisconsin went out in the quarters with an injury. And at the Big 12, Cardinal was on the mats for a second, and they both got wild cards. How does that work? Because they're returning All-Americans?
No, previous accomplishments have 0 to do, and that's part of the historical data thing. So when Killian was really on the cusp too, I honestly have to believe he was the last one in, because that's the risk you take though when you default out of a tournament or medical forfeit out, because in his case, he was undefeated. He had to technically take a loss, because if you medical forfeit, you don't actually compete. That bid gets tossed back into the at-large pool. So he had to step on the mat, then to take a loss, so that dropped his win percentage from 1,000, because he was 10-0 going in, to 90%, 90.9. So that puts him in with a win percentage. He had a pretty good coach's rank, but had no RPI and had a very, very few number of matches, and he only had 1 win over a qualifier, which was really, really, that put him on he was ranked pretty high in the country, returning All-American from 2021, but that was the risk he took. I feel like he was really, really close, and that hurts because, obviously, Brian and his dad go way back. He wrestled at Old Dominion before they dropped the program. So, I've got a vested interest in how Killian does. So I was looking at that, but Austin Gomez, he was probably a little safer because he beat Yanni Diakomahalis. He had good wins throughout the year. He just got hurt late season, whereas, he had enough matches. He had enough quality win. He had an RPI. He had a coach's rank. So he was in a good spot. The risk you take, again, is if you're on that fringe and then you default out and forfeit out, you leave it up to the rest of the pool, because all it takes is upsets from other conferences to steal bids to bump you down. So what happens if I'm not going to use Spencer Lee for an example, but say Liam Cronin and D'Agostino from Northwestern, say they don't place at the Big Tens and they need a bid, or they're in the pool against Killian Cardinal, and it's like, that's a tough spot. So that is the risk you take, and it's a lot more risky. I do think, and this is not about Killian, for example, but I do think they should probably hammer the medical forfeits throughout the year a little bit tougher, because there are some wrestlers that got in with 3, 4, 5, and even 6 medical forfeits this year. They bailed out of that many events, either early, and Cardinal did that at Midlands. He did not wrestle the second day, so he got a couple matches, and then, loses the opportunity to lose, but they also take the opportunity away for the wrestlers to beat them. Now they get the medical forfeit win, but it doesn't count when it comes to head-to-head. So I think they should probably look at the medical forfeit case a little bit more to say, look, you sat out this many matches, and then there's it basically right now it's kind of a no risk. Like, well, I'm out. I can't take a loss. I can't get any wins, but I'm also avoiding losses. So that's, again, the one risk you take is when you forfeit out, especially in a weight where it could be unpredictable. You do risk it.
Yeah, let me say something on this, Jason and Kevin. As a guy coach in the '80s, I like the new system better.
Yeah.
No system's going to be perfect, okay? And you have to have some type of algorithm and formula to
Go ahead.
based on what happened this year. Where when I coach, it was based on a 3-year moving average, if I'm correct on that year amount, Jason.
I think it was
And
5 years. It
I
got
like
to
this
5
system a
years, I
lot
believe,
better.
at one point.
It got to 5 years at one point, okay. But the point still stands that whether it's 3 years or 5 years, that it was somebody that's not wrestling anymore is in the calculation. Where
Yes.
this is this year's stuff.
Yeah, and it's only against Division I, and it's only against wrestlers at the weight class. Now, the thing this can sometimes hurt is if a guy moves weight classes or somebody gets hurt, and then you've got to bump up to another weight. Your matches at 141 don't help you if you've bumped up to 149. They do maybe in the at-large pool when you get down to the end, because all matches win percentage is kind of a factor that would be it's one of those 7 points. It's like, okay, what's your win percentage in all matches? But ultimately, I think there was one wrestler, it's in the guide, by the way. You'll see he bumped up, and he's only 8-3 at the weight class, but he's like 27-10 overall. So those are some situations where a move of a weight class, you've got to figure out, am I going to be able to wrestle enough? And then there's some situations like Arizona State moved Yasagare up to 41 and entered him because Vasquez got hurt. And it was like, well, he had one shot at it because the Pac-12 only qualified one at the weight class. So sometimes there's risks you take when bumping up late in the season as well.
Yeah, and in the old days, you could change your weight class at NCAA tournament.
Oh, way back. I think Rick Sanders, famously from Portland
Is it Larry
State.
Owings a case of that too?
Yeah, I believe he went down from the.
Yep.
I'm not sure if it went to conference because again, in that era, let's go back to our first point. Prior to 70, I want to say 70, or was it, I think 72, according to Gary Brownell, aka Gimp, might correct me on this, but it was either 72 or 70. It was in that range where the NCAA tournament was still open. Like it was, the college division placers had to hit a certain threshold to be able to enter. But if you had an NCAA team, you could not place at the Big Tens and go, because back then the Big Ten only placed top 4. So you could actually go to the championships. There wasn't a qualifier prior. So this is part of the things, if you see on the screen, I have individual all-time participants, not qualifiers, because there really wasn't a qualifier prior to the 70s. So you can't, that terminology doesn't exactly work going back to 1928. So you could just go. There are situations historically where teams couldn't pay for the train trip. And right now you don't want to do that going through Ohio anyway. They couldn't pay for the trip to get to nationals, so they didn't go that year. If they were out in Wyoming, well, you're not going to see a lot of the Eastern teams go. And if they were, say, at Lehigh, you're not going to see, the Utah states back in the day or the Colorado states head on out to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. So, the qualification system back then. But yeah, Rick Sanders, I think, was a college division champion, or actually, I think I could look this up off the top of my head, but or I could open up even more stuff to bore you with my stats thing. Pretty sure he was at 123 at the college division and then dropped to 115 for the NCAA or the university division championship. So it was one of those situations where he one year he did not win the college division, and then I think he placed higher at the NCAA university championships than he did the college division. So yeah, you could shift weights up until they had this qualification system. Now they did a regional qualifier until they went to the conference structure. And that was like, in some regions, I think they said there was like very few. I think they did a New England region. I remember reading it in the Amateur Wrestling News, researching this, and it was like, yeah, there was like, 38 guys showed up to try to compete. And it was like, yeah, this needs to be more equitable. So the conference structure we have pretty much now is how it kind of began. Really started to take shape in 1972 to 74 in that range.
Yeah, 1970 was the last year that you could go without going 71 and went to a regional qualifier. I know because that was my senior year, and we had to regionally qualify. Before that, you could just go. 1970. There wasn't a you didn't have to take first or second in your conference to go. Coach could decide to take you.
And that's one thing you also want to know. And I don't have it off the top of my head because I haven't built my table of contents yet, but it's the number of qualifiers in the tournament per year. That's in here somewhere. Trust me, it's in here. So, we've got, I'm going to leave it on Dan Hodge here on the screen for a little bit. Yeah, and you know what? It's one of those things that I want to be able to answer these questions. And this isn't not just for me to put a little coin in my pocket, because a lot of this data I have collected it's there's places I have it, there's places that other places have put it up, but the collection of the historical data with the current data in this preview guide is something you will not find in one single place. So, and a lot of this I've got to give credit to the late Jay Hammond, who before he passed away, you might remember him from WrestlingStats.com, and he was an old Lehigh guy. The Lehigh cadre is really kind of what helped this database project with some reach out to their Cornellian friends like Jamie Moffitt and such, and but to initially built this massive database. Now, before Jay passed away, he gave me a copy of this database, and since then I have added, I don't know, probably if there were 10 fields per each weight, there's probably 30 to 40 fields per each athlete now. So we've got all sorts of stuff, and I'm keep adding to it. And this is basically how I can present it. But it's also, this helps me become educated on situations like Kevin saw. But I wasn't even born until 1979. So I can't speak from experience on what happened at Northwestern when Larry Owings beat Dan Gable. I can watch a grainy video. I can't speak about what was it like to qualify through the East region when Mike Moyer was coaching at George Mason. I can't speak. I mean, I was born then, but I it's one of those things that I don't have that personal firsthand experience that a lot of our wrestling fans that still go every year, and they may need to, hey, what happened when? I want to be able to answer those questions. And, some of the things, our sports record keeping has been a little suspect over the years, and I'm trying to help, repair that. And that's a big part of this guide, is something I work on it. I mean, I've been working on this year's data since November. So that way, when we get done with this show, I can hit save on the video and upload it, and then go back to work and get this thing out for everybody. Because what it's really been fun is it's been educating, the people of my generation and younger. I'm 43 years old, and we got people that are loving going to the tournaments that are in their 30s. They're now to that point where they have the discretionary income to spend 3 days and get rowdy with their buddies, once, twice a year. I know, Kevin, this is why you love it. Glenn, this is why you guys have a blast up in that William and Mary box. And, I've been up there and I've seen what, the camaraderie with it. And then to hear you guys tell the stories about, and you guys are always looking for an answer to a question. And hopefully things like this will answer those questions. So like Dan Hodge has been the only wrestler on the cover of Sports Illustrated. That may or may not be a trivia question you hear this weekend. I send to, or next weekend I send to the NCAA for a little help there. But, just having that data and being answered the question. This is like the bar bet manual, man. Like, no, I bet you so-and-so was here. Yeah. I get those texts all the time. I'm everybody's phone a friend when it comes to serving bar bets. Hey, did this guy place in so-and-so? Hold on. Click, click, click. So, again, I don't want to make this sound like this is a me fest, but there's so much information in here that is going to educate you. Even if you were there, you're going to see something here that, oh, yeah. I was talking to Drew Periano last night, and we were talking, his brother, interestingly enough, was a 3-time blood round guy. And he goes, yeah, we were at this weight class, and he was mentioning, like, Steve St. John and Dinesh, yeah, it's like all the guys at 134 in 1994 in his weight class. And I went to start looking at it, and it sent me down a rabbit hole. Holy crap, that weight class was loaded. That's what I love about wrestling statistics is, for me, I discover something new almost every time I look at it. For those of you that have been in this sport for a long, long time, it's going to re-trigger a memory and a conversation with somebody you're talking about. I guarantee you, every single person that has a beer between sessions or has a soda between sessions or does whatever they want between sessions or next to their friends or coaches or, you will have a question that I hopefully will be able to answer in the guide one way or the other. But that's one thing. It's kind of our crusade on this show, and my crusade in my career here in wrestling is to educate and inform. I may not be the most trendy guy in the world these days. I got nothing but dad jokes, but I might be able to answer some questions. And if I don't know the answer, problem is I'm going to probably sit down and start figuring it out because I can't not know the answer to a question like this.
Yeah, Jason, and to expand on that, Kevin and I and many William Mary wrestlers have been there like every year for decades and decades. Um, and reading this book brings back memories or some things that I didn't even know when I was at that tournament. And you really can't go to the NCAA tournament without this guide and be well armed.
Now, I will say there are some things in the guide that you are going to see in the program. Now, their program is pretty slick looking. It's a really full color. I mean, it's one of those things like, yeah, this is pretty good. But I've actually done things like with the Gormley Awards, for example. That's in the book. But do you know? Are they ordered? Do you know who Daryl Peterson, 1985, is the fastest fall all time guy. He has 5 falls in 5:31. That's the fastest Gormley Award winner in history. Now we go all the way down to, let's see, where was let's use the last one on the list. So Ted Alice, 1961. Well, he had 2 falls in 10:18. That was the Gormley. So they're ranked in this book by speed, by number and speed. So it's also one of those things like breakouts. Like one thing I really like is not just the 4-time, the multiple time champs that are in this book. So, and that's the one thing that you want to make sure you don't miss anybody. And with thousands and thousands and thousands of data points in here, there is bound to be a typo or something missed. So if you see something, don't freak out. Just email me and I'll see what I can do to research and correct it too. So also I'm adding this little, here's a little freebie for you this year. We got 2 guys going for 4 championships for the first time in a year. It's never happened at the Division I or NCAA championship level, high level. I've got Yanni Diakomahalis' complete career record. I've got Spencer Lee's complete career record in here. So those are things you're going to want to know. Hey, what did Yanni do? What did Spencer do? And so we've got all this stuff, and there's a couple things you're noticing the 8-bit theme. So that's pretty much throughout the home state discussion. That's also an argument. What state has the most champions? Well, right now it's Oklahoma. What team has the most place winners? Well, right now that's the state of Pennsylvania. And cue the Iowans with the per capita debate. I love when that comes up because then you start arguing so many different things about the numbers because what is it, Glenn? Lies, damn lies, and statistics.
There's liars,
right?
Damn liars, and statisticians.
Yeah.
And I'll throw a little stat out there for you. William & Mary's never had a guy win the Gregorian Award, but in 1988 we did have the fastest pin in the tournament. Dr. Mark McLaughlin had the quickest pin of the tournament that year. Yeah,
that's one thing I do not have yet, and I have to go back through through Jay's files because, again, he used an Access database, and I'm learning how to use SQL. So sometimes I've got to do. I tell you what, I also have to give my wife Abby a huge plus on this year's guide because what she taught me the basics of a VLOOKUP. And if you're in spreadsheet world, it sounds super nerdy. But now, I mean, the file that I'm using has, let's see, 2,600 names in it. I started tracking this stuff, and then, each week the pirate would send the results. I'd update it, and then I have all these formulas that are breaking. Okay, I need to know what they are, and I had them ready. So now, when the seeds come out, all I have to do is plug in a number that'll tell me what it is for the seeds, and then I can basically tabulate what each wrestler's records were versus the seeds. That's one thing I'm going to be able to look at this year. You're going to open this thing up, be like, hey, what did Spencer Lee do against the 4 seed? And you go down, oh, he was 2-0 this year. You can be able to do that. And that's something that having all this data and something like VLOOKUPs.
Spencer Lee's going to be easy, though, Jason.
Spencer Lee is going to be easy. But okay, so, and then other things like how did this guy get in? And then you see their records versus the field. That's something that I can look up and go right away once these seeds come out. That way, I can do it now because the at-larges are out. But this type of stuff, quickly available. It answers so many questions, and it basically leads me to more questions. Like I said, there's a big part of those groups. Now, I have to read the don't bet on it thing from the NCAA, because, you don't gamble NCAA thing. But one thing that we know wrestling fans do is they have their little pools. And they have their, there's the St. Patty's Day draft. There's some massive drafts out there. I've seen, big renting out rooms and big drop screens and projectors and, rooms of people are sitting there like, all right, they're picking their teams and they need every little point of data they can get. Well, this is for you. If you've got a draft, you might want to take a look because if you see on the screen, I'm taking a look at here's the bonus percentages this year. And now this includes the forfeits and defaults because if it's a dual meet, you're getting bonus points for that. So, and I'm not going to take them away for you. I'm not going to discount. But anyway, I'm getting too in the minutia with the bonus point stuff. But here's the list of all the wrestlers, the top 150 wrestlers in the tournament, and their bonus percentage of the years. So, hey, you need some points in your late round picks. Okay, well, let's find that. Who's that 9 seed that's pinned the crap out of everybody? Well, we've got all the falls there broken out. Okay, let's see. Did you know, Gable Strickland from Lock Haven leads the nation in falls among qualifiers at 133. That may be, hey, I need somebody for a late round pick. Now, I'm not saying he's not going to perform, but let's just say you need somebody in a late round pick. You're like, man, I need some extra points. Who's going to give me those 2 extra points on the backside? Well, this is a good little push for that. So, you've got that there. It's going to help you draft. And then, those are the things that I like that, I can't really endorse. I cannot endorse gambling on this because, I can't do it. And I'm not really a fan of it on my own because I don't enter pools and stuff. I mean, if there's no money involved, I can enter a pick'em or something. But again, for those of you that want to use this for whatever pick'em fantasy game you've got, this is also a perfect opportunity for that too.
I tell you another thing that it is. Glenn and I were talking before we got on the air this morning, and we were saying we remember things that we're not sure that they really happened. And so I've gone back to your guide thinking I know something I found in your guide. Oh, no, it didn't happen like that.
The Mandela effect.
Yeah.
What was it? I think the Mandela effect was based on that Mandela died, but he didn't. Or the other thing is, my version of Mandela effect is I thought Morgan Freeman played Mandela back in the day. No, it's Danny Glover. Or the more relative of my age is that Sinbad was in a movie called Shazam with the genie, and it was like, no, it was Shaq and Kazam. And, there was that whole, no, I remember seeing it. There's that whole, it didn't actually happen. So, yeah. Moving to other things that I love about data in the NCAA championships, and I can't remember who used to do it, but there used to be this thing called the Unseeded Nationals. And it was basically, and I remember, I think it was Cam and Tabby Plokus talked to me about it one year. Their dad Van was involved in it at some point. I remember seeing, and somebody had the satchel bags, and your draft was picking nothing but unseeded guys. Well, we seeded all 33 now, so gone to the Unseeded Nationals, and I think I gave that credit at some point. But here on the screen, for example, you can see the top 17 through 33 performances now. And I got everybody that's made at least the blood round since we've instituted that in 2019. And I bolded everybody who was an All-American. Of course, Wyatt Sheets got in this year as an at-large. That one year he got in, he was an alternate and got in as the 33 and placed. I call it the I'm not even supposed to be here today award. That type of stuff is in here. I mean, the data you can get from a 330-person tournament is absolutely bonkers. Also, you can tell what teams have done well with their seeds. I've got a chart in here right now we're looking at is what schools have had, remembering the unseeded. What schools had the most unseeded place winners? Iowa State has had more unseeded wrestlers from 79 to 2018 placed the tournament than any other school. And of course, we see that one at Oklahoma State. We know who that was. We know that was Mark Branch. And we know that one right down here, the NC State, that was Matt Reese. So, those are some cool things that help you remember. Other things is trends. We look at what the seed performance is. And I call this is like my fantasy game section. I realize I'm going backwards.
Hold on a second, Jason. Didn't Mark Branch wrestle another unseeded guy?
Laszlo Molnar. Yes.
Thank you.
From Cal State Fullerton. So,
in the finals, 2 unseeded guys made the finals. Right
there. I'm highlighting on the screen. That would be Laszlo Molnar, who was from Hungary, actually. And then Mark Branch up here. So, of course, Mark Branch's story just takes on a life of its own, because he won it. I think the time was he won it the year Pat Smith won his 4th, under 500 into the tournament, went 1-2-2-1 in his career. Yeah. Now the head coach at Wyoming. So, these are some things that
I think the tournament was at Carolina that year.
I was not. Let's see, 94. I was a freshman in high school. Also, Glenn, You'll love this. This is part of the fantasy stat stuff. I'm going to give this little bit away. When you're making picks or something and you're filling out your bracket, never in history of this tournament have 1 through 8 placed in that order.
Yeah, you've told me that before.
Happened. 0 and 430. That's nuts. It's so hard.
Yeah,
actually, last week at the NAIA championships, there were the quarters. No weight classes had the top 8. So it's wacky. I love this stuff. You can tell how much I geek out about this stuff, but but it's all about this
Yeah,
tournament.
you do a
It's
great
all
job
about
on
this
Jason.
tournament. This tournament
Yeah.
has more stats than any other event in our sport because there's no other tournament. March is all that matters. Well, this is the event that's got results. I've still got to go through and get the history of all the results, but I'm just adding so much to it. Ultimately, I would love this thing to be 500 pages and answer every question in the history of the world, but I don't think that's too realistic. I don't even know if I've got that much time left in my life to make that work because I'm 43 and it might take another 43 years to make it work.
So I have a question. So we're talking about getting the seeds, and we're waiting for the seeds to come out. And every year there's 4 or 5 really clunker seeds. Is the seeding done based more on a formula now, trying taking the human element out to take and so I know like the EIWAs this year there was a number of really weird seeds, and I think the NCAA's have the same issue because they use RPA, et cetera, RPI.
Yeah, there's multiple things that come in, and they're all weighted at a certain point. Then I've never been in the seating meeting, so I cannot tell you from experience. I know people that have been in that meeting, but the way I understand it is if they line them up, and if there's athletes that are within a certain range, like if there's these two are really close, that it's close enough to discuss, they discuss, and then maybe they vote on moving. So that's the way I believe it. No, I believe it to be happening. So again, I'm not an expert on how that happens, but yeah, it's a lot of it is generated by numbers based on all the data that they throw in there, and then they spit it out. And there is a little bit of a human element in there. Be like, it's not like, well, that guy's way over here. If they're 3 spots apart, you can't really do that. Or if there's so much of a gap in the data says, well, you can't really move it. They're not going to be just trump their own thing. I think it's got to be within a certain threshold. So again, I can't speak on any authority there.
Okay, so there is no like formula that says
no. It's a formula, but they have to. Then they
add a human element.
There is a human oversight portion to it. Now it's not oversight in the fact that they're going to correct something that doesn't pass the eye test. Eye test doesn't really matter. It's what the data tells you it does. The way I understand it, I don't want to speak for the NCAA here because again, I'm not speaking from a position of authority in that regard.
Makes sense. But also, am I right that they only take this year's wrestling and they don't take into account, like I can be a 2-time All-American, but I got hurt mid-season and now I'll be like an 18 seed and I'm a 2-time All-American based on this year's data. Is that pretty much
100%?
Okay.
Now that previous year placement may help you with that coach's rank throughout the course of the year, riding that name recognition. But when it comes to looking at the data this year, it's not going to help much.
Yeah.
Actually, it's going to help none. It's going to help none.
Yeah, numbers don't see things.
Damn statisticians.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I tell you what, it's one thing that I do all sorts of breakdowns with the other divisions, but when we get to the Division I championships, just the amount of stuff to pour in through. And then, you're looking, the best thing about wrestling is it's not wrestled on paper. It's not wrestled on numbers. You put 2 warriors out there and, ultimately most of the time the better man wins. Of course, wrestling has the great equalizer where, it's a great quote that's attributed to one previous guest, Wade Chalice. He says, I may not be able to beat you, but I can pin you. So, we have a great equalizer in our sport too. So these are things where, I've got on the screen right now 1 seeds who didn't place, and there's not been that many of them. So, the last one was Marinelli in 2021, but then you go back 10 years before that when Darian Caldwell got hurt in 2011. And then, famously, one of my buddies from out in Grundy, Scott Justice, was an undefeated 1 seed at 84 in Albany. The first year I went to the Nationals and see one of my buddies get beat, and then my roommate, who was the 5 seed, get beat in the first round. It was like, I'm excited to be at Nationals, and it was the most demoralizing, 45 minutes for like, yeah, my roommate's in the tournament, and yeah, my buddy from Grundy's in the tournament, and then they both just did not have a good day. And it's like, it's something about wrestling. You can have that amazing feeling of euphoria when you have a guy like upset the 1 seed, or you pull off a big win, or your team is on a run, and then all of a sudden, wrestling doesn't care. Wrestling does not care. and it will spit you out, chew you up, and just hurt you. Because again, it doesn't care. I just love when we get to Tulsa. I'm grinning about going to Roanoke for Division threes, which is another that could be another topic entirely about the craziness at the Division three tournaments, where I think I've been going since 2009. I think all but 2 years there's been a 1 seed losing the first round. Last year it took until heavyweight for the 1 seed to get beat in the first round. Yikes! 1 seed wins that match. Guess what? The Berg streak is over. It's crazy on how things work in this sport. And we're not numbers driven, but I tell you what, numbers do drive a lot of our conversations.
Yes, they do. Data drives a lot of conversations.
Now, as we get to other things that we've talked about that you can do while carrying around these numbers or looking at it on your phone or your tablet, or those of you, again, who I feel bad for that they're going to kill a bunch of trees printing this bad boy out. It's when you go to between sessions, you get there. I like getting there Tuesday because the NCAA wants to get there Tuesday, and I actually get to. I have one little day of like, okay, I can go out and see what's going on in Tulsa before, Wednesday it's work time. I don't get to. I may wave at some friends, but for the most part, you don't see me. I mean, you'll see me on and hear me on the floor, but I don't get to socialize until Saturday night after the finals. By that time, I just want to see my running buddies, have a beer and then wake up and have brunch in the morning and go home back to my family because going NAI D3 D1s three straight weekends. I'm home for 5 days this month, so it's nuts. So I look forward to it. What I love about this is getting there and sitting down. The conversation we just had, for example, is just a microcosm of every conversation that's going to happen at nationals. I freaking love it. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I'm picking up Kevin.
What we should have done, we should have had a beer. Each had a beer in our hand to have this show. I mean, because that's really what this.
I mean, it's my kids aren't even home from school yet, man. It's 2:30 here local time. I've still got mountains of hours. I got to pack and prep for D3s too, man. Like, I mean, I am in a speakeasy. I mean, this was a bar built for wrestling and now hockey, so it's fully stocked. The fridge is fully stocked, so it was ready for 2020, and that didn't happen. So it's still there.
I'm picking up Kevin at the Little Rock Airport to go to Tulsa on Wednesday. So we're going to be talking about this guide and all this stuff the whole way from Little Rock to Tulsa.
Well, you'll have it by Wednesday, I guarantee you. So March 14th is my drop dead and getting this thing out. However, I think I may be able to, again, the VLOOKUPs and the searches and the merge documents, I use Adobe InDesign. So what you haven't seen here is this is actually the working file. So let me zoom out a little bit just to give you one more piece a little behind the curtain. So I've got all this, and then, so let's go with the pages. Let's open up some pages and... Well, let's do that. I don't do very well with instruction and such, but yeah, I mean, we got all that stuff. What's that? That's the qualifiers for Air Force. So I've got all this stuff over here. I was playing with different headers and stuff. So I mean, again, I use this. I got all these. It looks really crazy. It doesn't look as good as it does, but this is basically how I design it. Our scheduled events. It's green. I've got it all green because St. Patty's Day. I've even got a pair of shoes. Matter of fact, I could reach over and get my shoes. You know what? I'll do that real quick. As you look at the schedule of events here on the screen with last year's champs. But when it comes to St. Patrick's Day, gentlemen, for those of you watching on screen, the Shamrock Air Force Ones are ready to go.
Sweet.
I think that might be a good place to end it, too. Say what, Kevin?
Brian's going to wear his hat again this year.
Oh, this hat that they got in Danville, I think.
Oh.
I don't know. Let's bad Irish accents notwithstanding. But anyway, Glenn, I think that's what I could, again, talk about this book for hours. But for everything you want to know about MattStats, WrestlingPreviewGuide.com, discount code MattStats, one word at checkout, all lowercase. It'll save you 20%. Trust me. This is like one of the, I mean, I've done a lot of cool things in this sport. I'm not going to lie. I've announced the Division threes will be my 50th college national championship. The Division ones will be my 51st. Wow. And, working it or announcing it at some point. Granted, I've only been announcing the national since 2016 across the 3 divisions that I announced, but, I've worked now 49 college national championships across all the divisions that I've been. And it's like, This is one thing that when you see, I feel like I put my reputation on the line when I put this thing out because it quite possibly is the best. I haven't written any books, but this thing is a freaking encyclopedia. So
It really is, Jason.
I just say know that yes, yeah, you had to buy it. I'm not giving it away because there's so many hours of work that, maybe 25 cents an hour is what I make on this thing. But I'll tell you what, you will not be disappointed. You will go back to this. Shane Sparks says he goes back to it every single week in their college wrestling season. So, and I may even make it into a yearbook at the end of the year too, because I've got all the data. But that's another show entirely.
Well, anyway, Jason, thank you for your hard work on that. As a former wrestler and coach, I really appreciate what you're doing. As a stats guy, hats off to you because that just changes everybody's knowledge and data they can have. And thanks a lot for doing it.
Hey, like I said, it's something I love doing, and I just feel like there's something. I mean, I always want to do a little bit more. Just want to do a little bit more. Add one more page to it. One more page. Now, real quick, if you do order it and things happen, I do make periodic updates. Now, I will not update it every single change. I know that we're expecting probably a wrestler to pull out due to injury. Sometimes that happens leading up. I will probably wait for 3 or 4 major changes to happen before I push out another version of this. You will get an email updated with a new version. So on the download link, you will get an updated version when I upload a new one, and we'll trigger a new email saying, hey, check this out. Now, if you've printed it out, I will also tell you which page is updated. So if you only want to print out one page, or if the change doesn't make sense to you to worry about it, that part is usually in my notes. Now I'm using a new system this year, so that remains to be seen. But pre-sales have been good. Again, you'll get an update when updates happen. So WrestlingPreviewGuide.com, discount code MattStats.
Thank you very much.
Kevin, what do you got?
Buy it. The only thing that kind of bothers me is I really wish we had done this because this has kind of been like my go-to and helped me with my pool. And I didn't want anybody else to know about it. But it's such a great book. I've been buying it for years. Love it.
Yeah. The question is, which one of you two wins the belt this year? We'll leave it at that.
Kevin Hazard to win the belt this year is my prediction.
I feel like Zach Pincus is like, how many years in a row? He's on a roll, isn't he?
Oh,
Zach Pincus is the Tiger Woods of the belt. He's the young kid who comes up and destroys all the old timers.
Yeah. So anyway, for Kevin Hazard and Glenn Gormley, this is Jason Bryant. You've been watching Matt Stats, talking about the geekiness that I love to live is this preview guide, and of course, all things. Enjoy the Division 3s in Roanoke, the Division 2s out in Cedar Rapids, and the Division 1 championships. Of course, we got the NAIA Women's Championships also happening. Championship season continues, but I'll see you in Tulsa.
See you guys in Tulsa.
See ya.